Atumawe, kia ora tātou. Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Nelson City Council. I'll commence by asking us all to stand for the opening prayer.
Almighty God, sovereign in all things, bless this city and its people. Guide us in local government each day, that our decisions may be wise and just, and magnify your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Good morning, Council. We have a reasonably short agenda today, but I would note that the Community Services Committee needs to follow on after this, so we need to be quite focused on the matters that are in front of us. I welcome Emily and Jenna, our youth councillors, to this council meeting. Emily, this is your first council committee meeting, I believe, so I'm sure that Councillor McGurk and Councillor Walker are going to help you along. If there's any questions, just you can nudge them in give them an elbow and they'll help you out in terms of what needs to happen. Jenna, you're an old hand at this, you know what you're doing. So welcome to the meeting. There are no apologies today. Everybody is here, that's fabulous, and we have an order of business that will be as set out on the agenda sheet. I'm not aware of any proposed changes, EJ or Chief Executive? Just the addition, but no change in the order. No change in the order, thank you. No one wishes to change the order of business. There's a request. That's great. Any interests that need to be declared? I'll ask that you keep your interests register fully up to date and you declare your interests when we get to the item concerned. Just in terms of procedural matters today, we have an item in public excluded. When we get to that item, I will be recommending that we move the relevant section of the Act that allows Mr. Mark Rawson from the Nelson Regional Development Agency to join that item for public excluded, but I'll do that when we get to the appropriate item. We have one presenter for public forum this morning. Oh, in fact, maybe we have two. I just want to check. No, that's for community services later. All right, thank you, EJ. So our presenter this morning is Mr. Jim Hilton, who wishes to speak in relation to the Brook Waimarama Sanctuary Trust. And Jim, I will invite you to join the meeting. Good morning, welcome. Jim, you have 5 minutes to present and to council, and ideally if you could leave some time for questions, that would be good. When you're ready, there is and wish to talk to us, you've got the button organised. Thank you.
Wonder, okay.
Good morning.
The microphone works, that's good. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Mayor, councillors, council employees and the public here today for this opportunity to talk about the Brook Waimarama Sanctuary Trust's plans to helicopter drop 25 tonnes of poison into the Brook Valley this winter. Last March, I prepared an expert witness statement which was presented at a council hearing about the proposed poison drop. It contained all the evidence needed for council officers to refuse permission to drop poison. It showed that council officers had been misled by the Sanctuary Trust during the resource consent process. It showed serious...
I'm sorry, Mr. Hilton. I can't have you making allegations like that at this council meeting. I'm sorry, you need to accuse an organisation of misleading. I'm sorry, that's not appropriate. You'll need Rachel, to choose your words more carefully.
I've only got 5 minutes. I can't go into the detail. It showed serious conflicts of interest between the Sanctuary Trust, the consultants and the contractors who have now built the sanctuary fence. The public of New Zealand have never been properly consulted about aerial poisons. Local government and central government have both perfected the art of pretend consultation, the consultation you have when you don't really want it. That has to stop. Council employees need to work with the public, not against the public. Loopholes in the Resource Management Act have been used by the council staff and the Sanctuary Trust to stop public input. It should be the job...
I'm sorry, Mr. Hilton. The statutory process has been run through. I'm sorry, and if you have problems with the statutory process, then you need to follow the law, which is to seek redress through that statutory process. This is not the appropriate forum to address that. I'm going to be quite clear. If that's the purpose of your public forum, then I'm going to ask you to stop. If you have a problem with the regulatory process, the law sets out the steps and the method for you to address it. It is not here in this forum. I'm quite clear on that. So if there is anything else that you wish to address in relation to the matter that has to do with general matters, I'm happy to hear you. If it relates to the statutory process, I'm not prepared to take this in this forum, and I can't. You're in the wrong forum.
Okay.
So I'm going to actually adjourn this for a moment, and I'm going to go and speak to Mr. Hilton to establish the nature of his public forum. We'll just adjourn for a moment.
Hello.
I'll just bring the meeting back to order. Mr. Hilton, if you could just pause for a moment so I can make it very clear to the council and the public who are here the issue that arises. We do not have statutory jurisdiction to review consent processes in this forum. That is a matter that would be addressed through a judicial process, and it's not appropriate. I've had clear advice from the officers that it is not appropriate for that to be explored in this forum, and Mr. Hilton, I've explained that to him, he understands that. He wishes to speak to us, however, on general matters in relation to poison drops, and I'm happy for him to continue on that basis. Mr. Hilton.
Thank you, Rachel, for clarifying that. Perhaps my understanding is a relatively newcomer to public forums, doesn't it? Okay, I'll just continue, and if you think that I'm not following the council rules, then you can stop me again.
I'll do that if I need to, but I'm sure we've got the gist of what we need to do here. Thank you.
It should be the job of of council employees to get all the facts, to err on the side of safety, and to consult widely if they are in doubt. Employees need to investigate conflicts of interest and follow up information which concerned members of the public bring to their attention. It is my opinion that employees sometimes sidestep and ignore some of the legislation which is designed to protect
I'm sorry,
its citizens.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hilton, that is over the line in terms of what you can do. I need you to withdraw those statements. If you believe that council officers have not followed due process, you have another forum to raise that. It is not here, so could you please withdraw those comments?
The problem is, Rachel, to contest those.
No, I'm sorry, we're not here to have a debate about that process. You have a legal avenue if you are not satisfied with commissioners' decisions or processes through regulatory processes. I am not comfortable on the basis of the advice that it can be raised here. And
I get the distinct impression, Rachel, that you're trying to close me down. I think that what I'm saying is perfectly reasonable under the circumstances.
I'll ask you to pause, Mr. Hilton, and I'm very open to hearing from you, but I'm very conscious that I must take into account the advice from the Chief Executive. I have a point of order raised. Councillor Ackland has the floor.
My point of order is just for my knowledge of what, because my understanding has been that public forum is essentially an avenue.
What is the point of order, Councillor Ackland? You need to...
I'm wanting clarification on the rule prohibiting free speech at a public forum. So I'm just...
Is that a point of order, Chief Executive?
Well, of course it is, because it's whether or not there's been a rule breached. So I'm just wanting clarification, Madam Mayor, that's all.
You believe there's been a breach of standing orders? Is that the issue?
Well, as I understand it, the direction that's been made from the chair has been that there has been a breach of standing orders given the presentation, and my inquiry is why we're not big enough and ugly enough to just listen to what someone from the public says and agree with it or disagree with it.
Because I am being advised by the Chief Executive and the Administration Advisor and as Chair of the meeting, and as elected members I must take into account the advice that I'm getting.
Oh, no, that's
it's really
right.
important.
So I'm asking for a clarification.
So your point of order, what is your point of order? You need to establish that. What is the point of order? Would you like to give us the standing order you're referring to? What is that?
Yes, my point of order, understanding orders, is what rule has been breached, because if there hasn't been a breach, then it's contrary to standing orders to have ordered that there's been a breach.
I'll ask the Chief Executive to respond, so you want to know what has been breached.
Madam Mayor, I don't believe Councillor Ackland is raising a point of order. He has a general question. However, I'm happy to answer that my advice to the Mayor is on a point of order, that there is disrespectful comments being made in relation to a process which has already been administered by this authority on the basis of communication of general community feeling. Mr. Hilton was advised that he could continue, but that if he wished to criticise the process that had already occurred, that was disrespectful and offensive to the authority.
Right, so that is the further
Well, just to understand it, so is that the standing order?
Excuse me, just a moment, Councillor Ackland. For the purposes of, I'm very conscious first that we have a meeting that needs to follow. We've got a lot of business to transact. You are not raising a point of order, but as Chair, I'm prepared to entertain that you want some clarification on this point, because I think that could be helpful for Council as a whole. So that is not a valid point of order, and we'll accept that. You'll accept that. You're wanting clarification. So and I'm happy to entertain that. So a further question of clarification in relation to the Chief Executive's advice.
Is it the disrespectful provision that applies to council meetings generally? Is it the point that you're raising, Madam Chief Executive? Is it the advice that's been given to the Mayor?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer was yes. His microphone wasn't on. Councillor Skinner, you would like clarification?
No, I'd just like to comment. I'd be interested to hear what Mr. Hilton has to say in regards to what he thinks we as a council or council's organisation has been misled. I think that's what his conversation is about. We had Mr. Farley of Tresillian Avenue come in and be critical of our process and critical of a service that we provided. Mr. Hilton here, I believe, is alluding to where he believes, and it'll be good for a public, it's a very public subject, and it'll be good for us as councillors to hear what he thinks that we are being misinformed. He's got an opinion there. I'd very much like to hear Mr. Hilton.
And Councillor, councillors, this is, I know this may be confusing, But the difference between Mr. Fahey's issue and
Farley Avenue.
oh, Farley Avenue, was it? I don't know which one it was. Whichever one it was. The difference is, I think I am correct, Chief Executive, Mr. Fahey's issues is that related to works activities of council. This matter relates to a statutory process for a resource consent. And while councillors, you may be interested, I'd like to know what you think you're going to do after you hear things if you consider it to be an issue. You have no statutory right to interfere in a resource consent process, and that is the division between your role as governors and the regulatory processes of this council. You do not have the ability to come into a regulatory process and redebate it or redetermine it, and that's why there is a distinction. Mr. Hilton has statutory rights if he considers the process was not properly followed, and he's entitled to follow them. Mr. Hilton, I'm happy to continue to hear you on general feeling around how the community feels about this activity or other activities, but if you are going to continue in relation to the process and the procedures for the resource consent, then the public forum item for you is finished. So your choice.
What you're saying, Rachel, to my mind, is absolutely outrageous. The attention...
Well, it's the, I'm sorry, it's the law, Mr. Hilton, and I'm required to follow the statutory processes and take the advice. Would you like to address this in relation to the general issues, or would you like to cease?
Yes, I would like to address this in relation to general issues. I spent a lot of time preparing this speech so that councillors could be aware of how I see what's gone wrong. Basically, what's gone wrong is that the general public have been excluded from decisions that have been made from the council. If I have been excluded and a lot of other members of the public have been excluded, that means that input hasn't been made aware. Council officers are making decisions without being aware of the full facts. And if council aren't aware of if council staff are not aware of the full facts, then they're likely to make wrong decisions, and decisions which trample on other people's rights. So that's why I'm here today, because I'm not the only person that feels this way. We live in a democratic society. I mean, public forums, 5 minutes. I come along here to a public forum, prepare a public forum, and I can't even get 2 minutes into it, but the mayor pulls me up on some procedural matter. I mean, it's now 9:27. I mean, you know, public forum, there's half an hour allocated to public forum. That's 6 people at 5 minutes each. I could very well have asked some of the organisations that I attend whether I could have spoken on their behalf, in which case I could have got 10 minutes. I thought I was being very reasonable and only speaking for 5 minutes.
So would you like to speak to your general issues?
I've spoken on them already. Lack of public input. That sums it up in a nutshell. Councillors and the council have to take more notice of what the public think, and they're being excluded at the moment. That's about it. I'll close it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hilton. Any questions for Mr. Hilton? Noting, councillors, that you cannot enter into debate or discussion about the statutory process in relation to the resource consent. Councillor Dalberg, then Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The question to Mr. Hilton would be, you made a comment that you presented in last March 2016, was that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Just because I would have thought that was the discussion as the process moved on, so you had a fair discussion there?
Not at all.
Presentation, did you present?
No, I presented the material and and there was no feedback whatsoever. It was presented. There was an independent commissioner that looked at it. He had no questions. He had the opportunity to question me. There's been absolutely no contact between me and the commissioner. I may as well have ripped up what I said and tossed it in the waste paper basket. That's that's the main reason I'm here today.
I think you've just expressed that nicely. Thank you.
Councillor Skinner?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hilton, you're coming here about the poison drop. What's your concerns about a poison drop?
That it's going to have ongoing costs to the community. I mean, the councils in the Nelson region have spent millions of dollars cleaning up messes from the past. Out of Mapua with the fruit growers chemical, the sheep dips, there's stuff all over the place. The Modellers Pond, I saw there's problems there with cleaning that up with chemicals in the bottom of it. Council should be, in my opinion, should be leading by example here, and preventing poisonous chemicals going into the environment, so that future generations won't have the clean-up costs afterwards.
And Brithycum is being dropped there. What any particular concerns that you would raise on that?
Through the chair, Councillor Skinner, please.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
No, sorry, I missed
Sorry,
that. I'm a bit deaf.
thank you. There's in the brook they're going to drop Brithycum. Any particular concerns about that poison? You've had experience in trapping and poisonings, is that correct?
Brithycum, it's not normally used on the mainland, it's usually used on offshore islands. The choice these days is 1080 poison, because the quantities are so much lower, it dilates very quickly. Brithycum, it's got a half-life of 157 days. It ends up in the soil. Every time there's a big flood, that chemical is going to wash down the rivers. It's going to go into the sea without a doubt. That's my concern.
Last question, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors.
You were alluding to a conflict from the sanctuary in providing information, possibly misleading us, and you're about.
I'm sorry, Councillor Skinner. Is that toward matters in relation to the resource consent process that you're referring to?
No. It's in regards to those who are building the fence and those who are providing the environmental report for the area.
To what forum have they provided that? And it's still criticising. I'm sorry, it's not. It's still disrespectful.
They provided that to our staff, who made a decision based on the information they got.
And what process was that, Councillor Skinner?
That was a process of us having a hearing, not
and
a public hearing.
And that's a resource consent statutory process, and you can't.
Well, Mr. Hilton, I think, was wanting to. What I gathered from his first few sentences was to allow us to understand what he felt from the public as of information he felt was important for us around councillors around the table, and I'm very interested in hearing that.
So, Councillor Skinner, as somebody that holds a Making Good Decision accreditation, you know that is a statutory process and you know the method of reviewing that, and it is not here. I'm not going to take that question. Last question from Councillor Skinner, Councillor Rutledge, if he has one. It cannot be in relation to the statutory process, Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Jim, I don't think anybody comes to a decision like, let's drop some poison in any area and enjoy making that decision. My question to you is, do you believe there is a viable, credible alternative that will achieve the same goals as the poison drop for eradicating pests from the Brook Sanctuary that could be taken?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Sorry?
Could you elaborate on that just a little bit?
There's been books written on this, Mike. The Sanctuary Trust could provide food for the birds during the winter. That would that would probably it would provide food for the birds up there and stop them from dying. It is not just pests that kill birds.
Sorry, that wasn't my question, if you could, Madam Mayor. It was quite specifically about a complete eradication of pests and does Mr Hilton believe there's a viable alternative of achieving that?
I think he's answered that question and said books have been written, and I don't
No, there's not a viable alternative. It's the ecological consequences of doing it are poisoning us as human beings.
Thank you, Mr Hilton. I understand the challenge that it is for you to pursue what you consider to be very important points, and I will just reiterate that my view on you presenting is not me analysing the points that you want to make, but being very clear that there is a statutory process that you need to follow, and it can't be here because this forum has no review capability at all in relation to the statutory processes. Thank you for presenting today.
Okay, thank you, Rachel.
Right,
I shall, if I cannot pursue this this matter here in public, then I will pursue it elsewhere. Thank you.
And that is your legal right to do so. Councillors, I thank you very much, Mr Hilton. Just in concluding public forum, I know this is somewhat challenging for those of you who are new to council and the processes, but it is very important that as elected representatives that you keep the separation between your governance roles and the regulatory roles of council. And I would just note in the last couple of days there's been a report from the Environmental Defence Society. It's mainly in relation to compliance and enforcement, but it makes quite clearly that point that elected members in their political role should not be involving themselves in the regulatory processes of a council. It's really important that you don't do that. So there is an opportunity. Thank you, Mr Hilton. You can now withdraw from the table. We've concluded public forum. There is an avenue for Mr Hilton to raise his concerns through the provisions of the Resource Management Act and judicial review proceedings, and those opportunities are available to him. None of us can make comment or draw conclusion on the processes that he has been, the issues that he's been raised today. And so my view of not letting him speak is making no assertions, having no thought about the validity of his statements, other than this is not the right place for him to bring them. Right, moving on to the next item on the agenda is the notice of motion, item 5, which is pages 5 through 9 of the agenda. We have a report that is attached. The author of that report is Ms Byrne. Is she here to present that report, or is the Chief Executive going to speak to the report? Chief Executive is going to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What you have before you is the notice of motion from Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor Walker. Ms Byrne has attached to the notice of motion some background information from officers that we felt would be useful for you to have in considering that notice of motion, and I'm happy to answer any questions relating to that.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the Chief Executive in relation to this item? Councillor Noonan.
My question, Madam Mayor, is if this was to proceed, what is the ramifications of that on our work program with our staff?
If I may, Madam Mayor, I believe that at 1.7 it shows that there is no allocated budget in this financial year, or indeed in the draft annual plan for next year, and there are no resources available between now and the 30th of June for the program that you have already confirmed, and indeed the program that you have in the draft annual plan does not provide for this in terms of resources.
All right, thank you. Chief Executive, I have a procedural question for you in relation to this matter. I am aware that you have had some discussions with the mover in relation to the notice of motion in terms of interest greater than the public at large. Could you please advise the Council on your advice?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I received the notice of motion from Councillor Courtney, and I did ask him whether he had any interests in that area. He confirmed that recorded on the interest register is a property he owns at Wakefield Quay. I appreciate that there are various ways in which this could be interpreted as to whether that has an interest, and my advice to Councillor Courtney was that best practice would be to say, I have a proximity factor. It could be certainly a perceived bias. I think it would be appropriate for me not to participate in this decision. and Councillor Courtney and I came to the conclusion that that was a matter that may be raised today, and this would be the advice I would be giving.
Just to clarify, Chief Executive, do you consider that Councillor Courtney has an interest greater than the public at large?
I consider that it could be seen to be so, and it would be wise to not participate in the decision making.
Right. Councillor Eklund?
I've got a question through you, Madam Mayor, to the Chief Executive. That's helpful, Madam Chief Executive, that you're able to give that advice. In the future, are we able to ask for your advice in these situations so you can determine the bias of a member?
Mayor, I'm not sure if I completely understand the thrust of Councillor Ackland's question.
Oh, sorry, I'll say it again. In the future, if a member has a concern about another member's interests greater than the public at large, are we able to ask you in a public meeting for your opinion on whether or not that member has a bias or an interest, given that my understanding is that member is able to make that decision on their own?
Madam Mayor, my answer to that would be yes. I would go further and say that it is my practice to try and alert the member to what I think might be the question asked and my advice that would be given if I am aware of those factors. Councillor Ackland has raised the issue that the law does leave the responsibility with the member. However, I am also clear that it is the council that is brought into disrepute, and I think those members who have been at the council since my first appointment, or the time I was first appointed, is that for the sake of council, it is wisest to be squeaky clean.
Okay, thank you. Further question?
Thank you, that's helpful. And no, I think that's fine actually. I'm content with that answer, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eklund. Did I have a question on this side? Councillor Noon and then Councillor Laurie.
Sorry, this was on, my previous question was on the item itself, so now that you're talking about procedural. Sorry, I may have missed, Madam Mayor, was it a member or a member of the public when you first, was it a member or a member of the public?
Pardon?
That raised the potential conflict. I missed what you said at the beginning.
As chair of the meeting, and I think several councillors had were aware that there was a proximity issue here, and on behalf of the members I've raised that with the Chief Executive to ensure that and I believe Councillor Courtney may have also wanted to get clarification from that, on that matter from the Chief Executive as well. I think that's appropriate, and I always encourage, and you know that I repeat this, I'm a bit of a broken record on this, always talk to the Chief Executive if in doubt, and Councillor Courtney's done that. Councillor Laurie and then Councillor Courtney.
A few questions from me. First of all, if we demolish the Four Seasons building at 250 Haven Road, how many car parks will we get on that space?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I'll need to defer to Mr Laverdis, who may need to get that answer for you. Perhaps Councillor Laurie could continue with other questions.
Right.
And we could... Yes, he's leaving.
He's going to leave it.
He's leaving the chamber.
It would be really good to know how many car parks we can get in that area. Another question, have we had expressions from the wider community, from the likes of Grey Power, Access for All, those sorts of people, about the lack of parking in that part of Nelson over the years? Because I hear it from people, but I just wonder if in any of our processes we've had representation from groups who'd like to see more parking for people in that area.
Madam Mayor, I regret to inform you that I'm not aware of everything that takes place in this organisation, so if such feedback has been given, I certainly haven't received it. I will make contact with Mr Laverdis and ask him to ask that question of the officers while he's downstairs also.
Would it be safe to assume then, though, as someone who sometimes goes to Guyton's and things, getting a park in that part of town can be very tricky, and there's it can be mayhem down there. Do we have any feedback on the issues about that are caused by a lack of parking in that part of town?
I think what we might ask is, have we had a series of complaints? Do we have complaints around parking? I think they're questions Mr Laverdis would need to ask. I'm not sure the Chief is going to have those to hand.
I'd be really interested to know what
So
Grey
we'll see
Power...
if we can gather that information.
I'd love to hear Grey Power's thoughts on this. So my next question, and it's a last for at the moment, in the report it talks about the potential of asbestos in the building, and 1.6 it says it talks about making good, the asbestos and making good. Does that mean there is asbestos in the building? I sort of infer from 1.6 that we've made a determination that there is asbestos, but I'm just curious as to whether that has been confirmed.
Chief Executive?
Not to my knowledge at this stage.
So it could just be the 160.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I think it is caution on the part of officers given the age of the building.
Okay, thank you very much.
Perhaps, Councillor Laurie, just given the wording, Chief Executive, because you confirm that, because what it reads is that it is dependent on the extent of asbestos to be removed. And when someone writes extent of, that makes you think there might be some there.
Exactly, Madam Mayor.
So that's what I would like to know. Is there asbestos there or not?
Thank
now, next on the list was Councillor Noonan, then Councillor Courtney, then Councillor Fulton, then Councillor Walker.
I was just scratching my head. It's not.
On Councillor Courtney.
Your Worship, I just wanted to, through you, draw Councillor Laurie's attention to car parking demand analysis that showed us, we were given it this week by NMA, and it shows a existing car park shortfall of 75 cars in that area. So a report to Council just this week from NMA, architects, planners, urban designers and landscape architects.
Councillor Courtney.
Said it was 75 cars. I'm just trying to help the officer. What's the problem, Your Worship?
Thank you, Mr. Courtney.
I think you know the problem, Councillor Courtney, and I'm very sorry, but the nature of that workshop was a public excluded workshop to deal with a range of commercial matters, and if that was not made clear by the officers, they indicated to me that it was during that process at councils, and that matter is
point of order, Your Worship.
Point of order? What is your point of order?
My point of order is, and I'd like you to confer with the Chief Executive on this, public are allowed to sit in on those workshops. They have in the past and they will in the future, so I can't see if it's a public excluded. I would concur with that, but they are public, open to the public if they wish to come along.
Chief Executive?
Madam Mayor, forgive me, Council, we're going to need to take a little bit of a sidestep on this, because I have to say that I was under the impression that Councillor Courtney has just given. And as a result of workshops last month, we made contact with LGNZ to inquire about the status of workshops because of the lack of certainty around these. The reality is that the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act defines a meeting in the Act and is clear that a workshop is not a meeting and it is not a forum open to the public.
Okay. So the Chief Executive has had a view around that. She's taken advice and she's had to amend her view. Her view is the view expressed is also the view of Miss Langley, and that matter will be coming to council for some discussion, and how we deal with that. So at the moment, I think my understanding was, and I listened to the people who were present for our workshop, that they were bound by confidentiality agreements. I think they mentioned those in the workshops, and I'm sure that the answer to your question, the question around car parking from Councillor Laurie, can be established in any event through a mechanism that Mr. Laverdis will bring forward. I'm sure that he's quite capable of calculating the car parks, Councillor Courtney. Now, I am a little bit conscious that we are having questions about an item that is yet to be moved, and I'd like some procedural advice before we go any further. This is a notice of motion, and we have a dilemma. I just want some advice as to whether we're following procedure here. There's been, in terms of a notice of motion, it's not yet live on the table because it hasn't been moved. Now, are questions appropriate until it gets to that point, Chief Executive? I just want to make sure we're not wasting Council's time or acting inappropriately. Advice to Chief Executive? You have good questions.
Some questions, in order to clarify whether one is happy to continue to debate and somebody is prepared to move it, are appropriate. Detailed questioning is not.
All right, so questions to the substantive nature of the item are not. Is that correct?
Getting into the point of almost debating is not what
All
should
right.
happen before
All
the
right.
matter is moved.
Excellent, thank you for that clarity. Councillor Fulton is next, then Councillor McGurk.
We had a site visit down to the area a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and when I was down there I noticed that there was an area between the Four Seasons and Reliance building which currently is no parking but could be made into parking, and also there was the area outside the Custom House which is currently switched off from, fenced off from public parking. So my question through the Mayor for the officers is at the time I asked about whether those areas could be utilised for the public to park at, and the staff were going to come back to me with some answers.
So if we could just get that information from Mr Levertis as well, as to whether there was some, we're just curious as to why that area is, yes, I understand that it's not currently leased to a party. So if we could have some clarity on that, Chief Executive.
Madam Mayor, we will endeavour to do our best, but I would make the point that that was a site visit for information relating to a workshop and wasn't anticipated to be required for today.
Oh, no.
We'll see how we go.
Councillor McGurk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is more a procedural nature. I'm wondering at what stage we are allowed to make any amendments to the proposed motion.
Chief Executive.
Madam Mayor, it may help if I explain that a notice of motion such as you have before you can only be moved by the mover of the notice of motion, and amendments are not appropriate, is my recollection, and EJ is confirming that.
That seems to be contrary to Standing Order 3.9.6.
Councillor, I missed that question, my apologies. I was just...
Well, I'm just wanting clarification from the Chief Executive whether an amendment to the motion, a proposed notice of motion, is acceptable, which seems to be contrary. The advice I'm given seems to be...
so I just can't quite hear you. It's...
that might be contrary to, I think, to 3.9.6.
I'm happy to answer the question, Madam Mayor.
Oh, no, it might be 3.4.
So Chief Executive is ready to answer that question. Chief Executive, just the standing orders provisions, your advice.
Madam Mayor, I'm conscious that you didn't quite hear the question, and if I may just, Councillor McGurk was asking whether the standing orders relation to motions and amendments applies, and my advice is that in the case of a notice of motion, it does not, because Standing Order 3.10.4, I believe, supersedes that, where it says that a notice of motion may be altered only by the mover with the consent of the meeting. I would make the point that that's not an amendment, but it's an alteration to the notice before it is moved.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This may be procedural, but in seconding Councillor Courtney's motion, I only considered the public good and the outcome that we were striving for. Certainly, I do admit to not considering any interest that Councillor Courtney may have, but my thrust behind it was purely in the public good.
Well, that's a matter that now you've heard the Chief Executive's advice on that matter, you'd need to turn your mind to, Councillor Walker. So we are at a point now where we have had some advice from the Chief Executive. I take that advice very seriously. Councillor Courtney.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I did too, and I appreciated the call from the Chief Executive. No question about that. But I also, and she had an opinion, and I respect it, always will. I also made some contacts with people whom I respect and trust, and they had a differing view on this. And I have knowledge on the subject as well. And I know that the Audit Office work on a very simple criteria. Has a person got a pecuniary interest in this particular property at 250 Haven Road? That's one. Has this person got an interest greater than the public at large? Those are the two criteria, very simple criteria that the Audit Office, the Auditor General looks at. And my response to that is no. Now, I don't want to get into a debate over this, and I want to be highly respectful because I think a lot of Councillor Rutledge. But if we were going to get down and dirty about this, and if people were going to deprive me of my opportunity to speak, I would have to raise that when Councillor Rutledge,
I don't
please
believe
don't
you
shut
can
me
do that,
down.
Madam Mayor.
Please don't shut me down.
I'm sorry, point of order has been raised, so you need to now cease. Point of order from Councillor Noonan.
It's just, I think that with
You need
the member is using a name, and I just wonder that whether that's inappropriate. I think
You need to highlight the point of order that you wish to raise.
I think you can use a general term, but not a name.
Is your issue in relation to respect? The points of it, you need to, if you're going to raise a point of order, councillors, you need to know the standing orders to know what they are. It shouldn't be for me to, you need to have them in front of you. A point of order may only be raised for a range of reasons, and you'll find it at 3.13.4, the types of order. Councillor Noonan, what is the point of order that you wish to raise?
I do find it
Disrespectful, thank you.
To use a councillor's name. If it's a general overall, I'm fine with that. I find it, I would not want that for myself, and I think my colleagues are probably a bit.
And in relation to the matter that is in front of us today, Councillor, in relation to the matter that is in front of us today, Councillor Courtney,
yes, Your
I
Worship.
don't have sufficient to uphold that that point of order at this point, Councillor, and I don't have sufficient to do that. But what I would say is that, Councillor Courtney, I will raise a point of order if you are discussing a matter that is not before the local authority today. So in speaking to this item, you just speak to this item, not to some other matter that is not before us. You can continue.
Your Worship, if I've offended Councillor Noonan or another councillor, I will unreservedly apologise to the other councillor if I in every way offended him.
And moving on now, Councillor Courtney. So speaking to the matter.
I'm telling this council that the Audit Office work on a very simple criteria, and I've explained it to you already. You're looking frustrated, Your Worship. What's the problem?
I'm just actually deciding whether you may be making statements that are misleading. The issues around conflicts of interest are complex. They go to books. The Office of the Auditor General has said that there are many nuances, there is case law, there are all sorts of things here. It is not a simple process, Councillor Courtney. The advice of the Auditor General is, if in doubt, stay out.
Your Worship, this is my view. This is my view. I'm defending myself. People are questioning whether I have a pecuniary interest, whether I have an interest greater than the public at large, and I am now stating my case. Please let me do that.
Well, you state your case, but I wouldn't want you to infer the simplicity of this piece of law. It's not simple.
Righto.
Continue on.
I apologise if I've done that, but that's my view, and I'm entitled to my view. And I'm going to say that if anyone would suggest that I have a pecuniary interest or an interest greater than the public at large over this matter, well, I draw to the attention of the council and you, Your Worship, the free bus that we provided, or the bus that we provided to Tahuna. Now, where did that go? That went to Tahuna Beach. Is a council member represented on a trust, say in the council beach area, the Tahuna beach area?
We're back to the point of order of it's not a matter before the council today. So I'm going to raise a point of order. I don't want to go back again. Councillor Courtney, we have, I want to move this forward. So where we're going to get to is either my advice to you as Chair, so is there anything else you wish to say in relation to the concern, the advice from the Chief Executive around her view around interest greater than the public at large? Is there some factor that you want the council to be aware of?
Yes, that I haven't, and I could get examples of other people that have been in similar positions to myself that haven't experienced this that I'm experiencing here today. So the answer to you is no, I haven't. And that's my view, and that's the view of people whom I respect and trust as much as I do our Chief Executive, but they have a contrary view, a contrary opinion, and I'm taking theirs.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Laurie and then Councillor Dalberg, and then I really want to see if we're going to transact this piece of business today or not.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to pick up on the point of order from Councillor Noonan. I just want to say this is a debating chamber.
Sorry, Councillor Laurie, you cannot discuss a point of order. I'm sorry, you cannot discuss a point of order. That is standing orders, so you cannot discuss a point of order.
Well,
my decision is final.
I won't discuss the point of order.
My decision is
I'm
final.
not going to discuss the point of order. I am going to make the point that this is a debating chamber. It is not kindergarten, and we should be free
I'm sorry,
to use
Councillor
each
Laurie.
other's names when we debate.
Councillor Laurie, that is not the matter that is before us for discussion today. Councillors, I am going to say that I am going to have to juggle the workshop program, and we're going to have a session on standing orders. Councillor Dalberg.
So clear up a technical point for myself. Can someone with a proximity interest, I think that was a term used, if they move a motion and then they have to leave the room because of that bias, how do they then sum up or close, or how does that actually action? I mean, if they're outside the room because they have to declare interest, how can they actually function?
All right. Well, Chief Executive will answer that question.
Madam Mayor, the answer is that if someone has an interest or indeed a perceived or apparent bias, then they cannot move that motion. They should not be in the room. So in the case of a notice of motion, the only way in which that could be dealt with is, as standing orders allows for the mover to give authority in writing to another person, another elected member, to move it in his stead. If I could just be particularly clear that if you are deemed to have an interest and leave the room, you are doing so on the basis that you have no involvement in the discussion, because it is back to justice must not only be done but be seen to be done.
Through you, Madam Chair. So my question, that's the point I was getting to, having read those standing orders. So I'm kind of figuring, why are we even discussing this once you declared, and you are the authority around the table, that someone has an interest, and I'm kind of wondering how we even process this at all.
So Chief Executive, could you just, for the benefit of the members, explain the advice and the step that has to happen? So the rule that there is no ability for the Chief Executive to give a ruling that means that the member has to step away. It is for the member to make that decision.
Madam Mayor, perhaps it would help if there is the best I can say is it's murky, in the sense that I give advice to you about whether I think you have an interest or not, and some of you are aware that I have raised this with you in this triennium, but it does sit with the member as to whether or not they believe they have an interest. And then the choice becomes whether the council is prepared to transact that business.
So understand that? So essentially, the member, the council, you sitting here today, is if you consider that you have a member who, in your view, does have an interest greater than the public at large, or pecuniary interest, or whatever it happens to be, then you can consider whether you wish to transact that business, considering the procedural, the process that you're obliged to uphold, because the obligation is upon all of us to make sure that our procedures follow the Act and the requirements that are there. And you need to think about the reputation of council and how you want to be, how do you want to be perceived by the public and what you are doing, and for public confidence in our decision making. Now, Deputy Mayor, and then we're going to get to the point really whether, and I'm going to give my view from the Chair around transacting this piece of business today.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What an interesting exercise. My understanding is if the member believes they do not have a conflict of interest, then they will wear the consequences of that decision the member has made. And I think we need to make that clear. And Madam Mayor, I am a bit like you on the broken record. I keep saying Declare your interests. If you're uncomfortable, leave the room. Don't get anywhere near anything that's going to in some way tarnish your reputation. But at the end of the day, standing orders are very clear. You will make that decision whether you think you have a conflict or not, and you will wear the consequences of that decision that you have made.
We have a final question from Councillor Laurie.
Just a comment. I mean, you were pointing out earlier, Madam Mayor, that we would have to make the decision as to whether or not we were prepared to transact this matter.
Have.
And I don't consider that Councillor Courtney has a conflict, and I'll explain why. It's next to a highway. It's a big area with a lot of movement. It's not a quiet neighbourhood. If there are more parks where the Four Seasons building is at the moment, that will not increase the value of Councillor Courtney's property. It will not change very much for him at all, but it might change. It might change people's access to the waterfront. So my personal opinion is we can transact this because I don't see the conflict. If it was a quiet little street somewhere in Stoke, maybe, but this is next to the highway.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. And I just would say that in relation to matters around conflicts of interest, then the advice is given from the Office of the Chief Executive. So you've heard the advice, and you can take on board that advice, which you can assess that advice as you wish. But the Chief Executive has given the advice, and you can determine, as Councillor Courtney may, whether he wishes to follow that or not. I take the advice from the Chief Executive in relation to these matters very seriously. And I've heard her advice, and as chair of the meeting, I think Councillor Courtney has had some options here where he could have asked in writing somebody else to move this today. He could have asked Councillor Laurie or one of the other members to do that. He's chosen not to do that. That certainly, as chair, is not my preference. I would prefer that, as a council, that the public have the highest level of confidence in our decision making, and that I do address the issue of, if in doubt, stay out. You've seen me step away from things, stormwater projects in the vicinity of my neighbourhood. I step away from those because there could be a perception that I receive some benefit from those. I step away from those. I've seen Councillor Noonan step away on occasions where there's been changes in her neighbourhood that are quite close. But that's a decision for the individual member. What I would say is that, as chair, my strong preference in this case is that Councillor Courtney steps away. But it's up to Councillor Courtney as to whether he wishes to proceed or not. Councillor Courtney, we're now at the point where you need to make the decision. I'm not taking any more questions. Otherwise, we're now deciding whether this item is going to move forward. If it does, we'll work through the next steps.
Your Worship, I already have, I thought, but I'll state it again. Yes, I'm happy to proceed. I have, as I said earlier, checked with people with whom I have every confidence. Like I do with the Chief Executive, their opinion is different to hers, and I'm happy to proceed.
Well,
I will move the motion. Item 5 on the order paper, I will move that the Council demolish the building located at 250 Haven Road, known as the Four Seasons, and that the adjoining property boundaries be made good, the surface area remaining be compacted with base metal to form extra parking for people and families visiting the wharf and businesses in the vicinity, and that these works be completed by the 30th of June. I move in that direction. I have a seconder, and I've indicated that on the attachment. Do you want me to continue now, or do you want the seconder to second the motion?
we can't continue till we have a seconder.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. It's been moved and seconded. So speaking to the motion.
Yes, I am. Your Worship and Councillors, this is in response, this notice of motion, to an immediate need that's been identified in the community. No question about that. The need is for extra parking for the wharf area and surrounding activities and businesses in the same area. That's the Sticks Restaurant, Guyton's Fresh Seafood, Haven Fish and Chips, and for all the people involved in activities down at the wharf. And not forgetting, of course, the marine rescue and surf lifesaving people. It will take pressure off parking for them too when they're called to an emergency. Your Worship, it's clear to me that we should open up this area for more parking. Now, NMA, architects, planners and urban design and landscape architects, in their recent car parking demand analysis, advised Council that there is an existing car parking shortfall of 75 car parks.
Point of order, Councillor Courtney, and you've already been, I've already addressed this with you. Now you are starting to treat this chamber with disrespect, and I'm going to warn you around that. We've already had that discussion this morning, and you've been given advice, and you really need to take that advice. That when we're dealing with matters, you asked specifically the question about workshops. We said those things are not public, and now you have continued in that vein. I need you to apologise to the meeting, Councillor Courtney.
Oh, I unreservedly apologise.
And
sorry.
I need you to really think seriously about your obligations to this forum. You can continue.
The need has been identified by myself, the people of Nelson, and experts in the field. Does that suffice? Thank you. Now, people and families want to be able to stop, park and view such things as the Heritage Wall and read the plaques there, take a stroll along the Millennium Walkway, fish off the wharf, sit on the seats leading onto the wharf and just observe happy people passing by. Others like to look in wonderment at visiting cruise ships as they dock at the port, and look in wonderment too at the super yachts as they come into port as well. Many love watching ships coming and going through the cut. A lot of people, a great number of people of all ages, enjoy seeing the container ships load and unload down at the port. Some take a ferry boat ride over to Haldershore Island, and others take a ferry boat ride over to the lighthouse. Other people, Your Worship, derive pleasure from viewing yachts sailing on the harbour and beyond, and others delight in seeing young people learning how to sail. As I've said just before, that parking is needed now, so people and families can stop, park and enjoy all these wonderful experiences. It's our gateway to the ocean. We don't want to over-commercialise this area, no, not at all. But we do want people to have easy access to the simple things that they enjoy down at the wharf. This is the only piece of wharf, this is the only wharf with public access, and people love it. It's an adventure for some, it's pure enjoyment for others, it's a happy place to be. And I want to share with you an experience I had before I get on to my argument in demolishing it, just a little experience I had that I will never forget. Recently, while sitting, having coffee late one afternoon at the Sticks restaurant, I was sitting next to a young couple, a young teenage couple at the restaurant. They were at the next table. It was late in the afternoon, the sky was a lovely clear blue colour, not a cloud to be seen. There was just a waft of a breeze,
Councillor
breeze blowing.
Courtney, I'm going to ask you to pause. I just need to ask you, are you reading from notes there? You've got notes of speech that you're reading?
Righto.
No, are you? Answer is yes or no?
Because I want to get it right as far as this young couple is
So
concerned.
you are familiar, of course,
Yes,
very familiar
right.
with standing orders.
Right.
You're aware that you're in breach of a standing order?
I'll continue without that.
Are
Your
you
Worship.
aware that you're in breach of a standing order?
I was wanting to get this
Are you
particular
aware that
section.
you're in breach of a standing order? There is. Yeah, point of order is, the point of, excuse me, councillors. Councillors, that is a point of order. Withdraw, councillor. That's
Your
not
Worship,
respectful.
Your Worship, you're testing my patience. What is going on here today? What are you up to? What are you doing? You're trying to shut me down, are you?
I think we may have to adjourn in a moment, because I think where we're at is that there are a set of standing orders, Council, that are designed to have a fair process in here. Now, Councillor Courtney, point of order is 3.8.5, which is reading of speeches. And if you wish to read a speech, you have to seek the permission of the chairperson so that we know it's there. Now, I've pulled Councillor Laurie up for that before, and we've upheld that point of order. In fairness to the members, I have to, in standing orders, I have to apply that fairly. Now, all you have to do is say, I've got a speech to read here, Madam Chair, would you be happy with that? And I will say yes. It's very simple, but you are very familiar with standing orders. You've accepted that, you know that. And while you can push them around and it makes the meeting longer, it doesn't actually lead the public to view this chamber with in a particularly good light. And one of the reasons I want you to be conscious of the standing orders is because you're governors of the city, and we need to be respecting at your inaugural meeting. You agreed. These are you know, we worked through this. We have standing orders for a reason. You've signed up to this. You've got to show respect to them. Now, can we continue with that? We can't have shouting across the room, Councillor Laurie. That's not consistent with the values of this council. It's not consistent with the values.
I was merely trying to illustrate how certain statements were being repeatedly said. That's all.
So you'd accept.
That's what
it's
I said.
not item for discussion. So can we respect our values? We've agreed to some values. We have a set of standing orders. What I will do for you, councillors, and Councillor Courtney, this is just a fairness. The standing orders are there to provide fairness and due process. There's nothing personal about them. They're fairness, and you know them quite well, and you know them better than most councillors here. You've had a lot of years of experience with standing orders, and I do expect you to follow them. So I'm going to continue the meeting, and I would really ask councillors to stick to the standing orders. It'll make for a faster meeting, a more effective meeting, and that's what we're here to do. So, Councillor Corney, I'm happy to give permission for you to read that speech. You may continue.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just getting to the good bit. Yes. That's right. Well, on this, just a few weeks ago, I was at the Sticks restaurant having a coffee late in the afternoon. It was a lovely afternoon. I was sitting next at a table next to a young couple, a teenage couple. It was late in the afternoon, clear sky, not a cloud to be seen, and an ever so slight breeze blowing by. A ship was going through the cut on its way out to sea. Musicians were playing soft music close by. And I watched this young lady at the table next to me take her boyfriend's hand, her partner's hand, and I heard her say, "Darling, this is heaven." And I thought, well, that is amazing that people have those sort of feelings down on the wharf. Your Worship, down to business. This building, this motion seeks to demolish, is at 250 Haven Road. Known as the Four Seasons, this building has a seismic rating of 24% and therefore requires to be strengthened. The leasing market has rejected this property. It's been vacant, it's been sitting idle for 7 years. The market has proven that it's fit for no purpose. And I will just briefly say this and pass on quickly in case you take exception, but I want to say that empty, scruffy, untidy buildings along a main highway are not a good look. I'll leave it at that. Any prospective tenant looking at 250 Haven Road would have difficulty, I believe, finding a bank, let alone an insurance company, prepared to back them to go into business in these premises. Council has a budget, I noticed, of $70,000 for maintenance on this particular building. We pay insurance and have paid insurance for years. And I say to you today, we must stop costs going out. This is ratepayers' precious money that we're dealing with here. No tenant, in my view, would pay 50, 80 or 100,000 for a fit out of a building if they know that the building's life is only going to be a further 3, 5 or 7 years. So I say to you, let's bring it down earlier than planned, and meet the demand. It's estimated that to strengthen the building, it'll cost $80,000 for the seismic work to be completed. This work will have to be undertaken before any tenant can contemplate occupying the premises. By demolishing this building, we will be going a long way towards providing car parks identified by professionals, experts in the field, the public, many of the councillors around this table. It will cost the council, in my view, more to retain this building than it will to demolish it. The price of demolition is only an estimate, a number. There are a lot of unknowns and a lot of variables in that estimation, and I appreciate that, and there needs to be plenty of fat in that estimation. But I'm confident the final cost will come in considerably less than what has been estimated. Now, the time frame for demolition is set at the 30th of June. And I want to tell you that my original draft motion, it was a much tighter time frame than that. I took advice from people whom I respect. They advised me to push the time frame out. And I did. I pushed it out to the 30th of June. And their response to me was, to my amended time frame, it's workable. So I want to conclude, councillors, by saying we were elected in October to work together to get things done. And I want to say to you, so let's work together on this one and get it done. And don't let's get bogged down, don't let progress get bogged down by the process, please.
Councillor Courtney, before I go to the Deputy Mayor who's next on the speaking order, there was some information that was sought by the council that related to the number of car parks that would be able to be established. It was the advice from the Chief Executive is 60, and there was 2 other items that were sought. Does the building have asbestos? And the answer is yes. And an assessment is underway to have a look at the issues around the asbestos. There was one further request which related to the area beside the Custom House that has currently got a chain across it. Do we have advice on that matter? Mr. Laverdis, I'll invite you to come to the table.
Thank you. Through the chair. The issue of the car park between the anchor building and the Custom House has been an ongoing issue between the existing tenant and council for a long period of time. The culmination of where officers arrived was to ask the incumbent to remove vehicles from that car park for a variety of reasons. And as a result of that, that land is owned by council, and in order to prevent those vehicles from re-entering that area, we have chained that off.
But Mr. Laverdis, just to the question that Councillor and Councillor Fulton can correct me if I'm wrong. What we want to know is that land, could that land be turned into car parking, public car parking?
Through the chair, I think it is possible. There are a number of structures underneath that that area, and it also provides access to, obviously there's pedestrian access to the Custom House, and it provides vehicular access to the anchor building. Could it be possible? I guess it could. We'd need to investigate that a little bit further.
Right. Councillor Fulton, any further questions on that point? And then just
the land between Four Seasons and the Reliance building, which currently has no parking signs, NCC no parking signs, could that land be utilised for public parking too? So basically I'm wanting to know if the land between the Custom House and the anchor building could be used for public parking, how many parks that would provide, and if the land between the Four Seasons and the Reliance building could also be utilised for public parking, and how much that would provide as a short-term solution.
So, through the chair, I've answered the first question. I just am unsure of the numbers. I
right.
need to be able
Thank
to
you.
have to have a look at that. In terms of the area between Four Seasons and Reliance, the reason we put up no parking there is because we had we have had a number of tenants that occupy that area, and there have been people utilising that area for purposes of potentially undertaking business that we didn't deem was in line with that area, and
All right.
that's
I
why
think
we placed those signs.
we understand that, but what Councillor Fulton would like to know, and I think it's very good questions, how many car parks, if we said, well, we want some more public car parking down there, how many car parks could you achieve in the Custom House to Anchor Building gap, and how many could you achieve in the existing area that already exists between the Four Seasons and Reliance? If you could perhaps do some work on that, that would be good. We're going to go to the Deputy Mayor, and we're going to take a morning tea break at 10:30, so that will give the officers some time to think about that. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually going to oppose this today, and it's not that I don't think in the long term it's a good idea. It's just that I think that we're a little bit early. We've been having discussions as a council, as you know, on where to with the Haven precinct in the next few years, and we've yet to make decisions whether we're going to do it piecemeal or we're going to do whatever we're going to do in total, taking into consideration, of course, that we hopefully will be considering where we go with Rocks Road. So there's lots of parts of the jigsaw yet to be put into place so that we get a good open plan with continuity. So what I'm really saying is I think it's a bit early, because there are other factors down there that we really need to have a conversation about and conclude from those conversations where to next. So it's not that it's nothing personal, it's just a timing thing with me. I want to make sure what we do in Haven is done in the best planning possible way, Madam.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Now I have time for Councillor Barker before we go to morning tea.
That's on, yes. What the Deputy Mayor has just said is quite correct, but there's more to this matter, and I'm speaking as Chairman of Governance Committee. And as Chairman of Governance Committee, I'm aware of matters that are in the confidential order papers of Council relating to this area, and in particular to the Reliance building. And in my view, it is premature to be making this decision today before Council has considered the live issue that it has, which requires a decision, a delegated decision to be made. And this can be discussed in detail in the confidential section, but not here. But the procedural thing is that there is a live issue in the confidential business of Council that relates directly to this and has an effect on it. And I think it is premature to be making this decision today, regardless of the merits of it. There are other matters that have to be taken into consideration by Council.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. I'm just going to take some advice from the Chief Executive in relation to that matter. Chief Executive, there is a live issue. Yes. I need your advice as to whether Council would need to take that into account in considering this matter here today.
Madam Mayor, my answer to that would be yes, Council should take that into account. And I think to elaborate further would be useful to be in public excluded.
All right. What I think we're going to have to do is we're going to take a morning tea break, and then what we will do is we will come back into public and move into public excluded so we can address that matter. I'll just... yes, so I'm going to take an adjournment for morning tea now, and then we're going to come back so the Chief Executive's got some time to work with the administration advisors around the matter that Councillor Barker has raised, rather than that we're just doing that on the fly. So if we could take a 10-minute break. I'm very conscious that Councillor Noonan has got quite an agenda to work through today. This meeting has got quite a bit of work to do. We're now starting to really eat into the time, so we're resuming the meeting. We're really starting to eat into the time available to the Community Services Committee, so I want us to be quite focused on the business that we need to transact today. There are several items still on the council agenda, and they need to be transacted this morning. Now, Council, I'll just take you back to where we were before morning tea when we adjourned. We had some information that was provided to Council around car parking. The officers have had the opportunity to confer, and Mr Levertis needs to advise you as Council that the information you received before morning tea is not correct, and he wants to update you on that information. So, Mr Levertis.
Through the Chair, thank you very much, and I apologise for the incorrect information being presented. The value of the number of car parks that I indicated at 60 took into account a potential future vision of that entire area, and that's probably not appropriate to look at the issues that we're facing now. I can advise that the number of car parks that we could realise if the Four Seasons was demolished would be in the order of about 20. And that we could accommodate 10 car parks between the Anchor and the Custom House. I do need to stress that both of those are subject to traffic analysis and discussions with NZTA, that is a state highway, and we need to look at safety of those intersections, and that has not been done yet, and I cannot predict what NZTA's comments would be.
Mr Levertis, there's one other area you haven't addressed. So Councillor Fulton asked about two areas, the one between the Custom House and the Anchor, and then the existing areas between the Four Seasons and the Reliance building.
So through the Chair...
so are we 20?
There's 20 for... If Four Seasons was demolished, we could accommodate 20.
Yes.
And between the Custom House and the Anchor building, 10.
Thank you. And what about the existing area that is already there now, sealed at the moment, between the Four Seasons and the Reliance building?
Approximately 10.
So another 10. So at the moment, with what's there, there could be potentially 20 car parks, subject to discussion with NZTA, provided with what is already there, an additional 20.
Correct.
All right. Now, just a follow-up question in relation to the issue Councillor Barker raised. In terms of the matter that was came to the Council in December in relation to the expressions of interest around the Reliance building, in terms of the matter that's here today, is there a possibility that there would be any impacts from this decision on the expression of interest process and the discussions that are going on in relation to that matter from a transport perspective? Chief Executive?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the Reliance building was advertised for expressions of interest in December. Negotiations with potential tenant continue, and I have received advice recently that there would be traffic management advice you as a council would need to consider, and you as the party with delegated authority would need to consider. I would need to give that advice in non-public.
So I need to be clear about, so in relation to councillors making an informed decision on this matter, you would need to give them that advice in relation to the transport?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so in order to do that, so in fairness to you, I don't want you making decisions with half information. I think we have no choice but to go into public excluded, because that's a matter related to negotiation, and we wouldn't be able to deal with that in public, and it won't. Hopefully, it won't take very long. So, could somebody please give me the appropriate words so that I can move that?
So it's this wording on your agenda, and it's for reason of 7.2i.
You need to help me with that.
Sorry?
Could you help me with that?
Yeah.
So I'll read after you.
So this is that's why you're doing it.
All right. So, Council, in order for you to be able to be informed of that information, we are going to have to move into public excluded. So I would move that the public that we exclude the public from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, which relate to this item, and the reason being is 02I and under the Act, which is to enable the local authority to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations. Is that sufficient, EJ? Would you like me to refer to another matter? So that would have to be moved. I'm moving that, seconded by Councillor Barker. Wish to debate the moving into public excluded? Councillor Eklund.
It seems kind of extraordinary that this notice of motion has been before the council to deliver to the chief executive for some time, a number of weeks. It's been on our agenda for a week, and yet this is the first time we're hearing that there's extra issues that we should be advised of, and there hasn't been any indication prior that we'd need to consider this in public excluded. There's no item on the agenda giving notice to the public that we'd be moving into public excluded in order to consider this item. That is debate, but the query is, why has this come up at the 11th hour?
It's a question for the Chief Executive in relation to, so the question is, why was this matter not included in the report to Council? I think that's the way to describe it, Chief Executive. Why was this not highlighted to Council in the report?
Madam Mayor, the matter that has been discussed in public excluded previously was not a matter that was in the knowledge of the officer preparing the facts that you needed in terms of what is on the agenda here today, and did not come to my attention until after the agenda had been prepared.
So I think, Councillor Eklund, I hear you, and I think, Chief Executive, what it signals is the importance of whole of Council input into reports to governance, so that we have good notice of the matters. I absolutely hear Councillor Eklund. Anyone else wish to speak? So you're speaking, it's been moved and seconded, so if you have a question in relation to what's been moved and seconded, I'll take that. Otherwise, if you wish to speak for or against it going into public excluded, I'll hear you. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and look, feel free to stop me if I do have this order wrong. My question is to the Chief Executive. It seems with this report that it's quite light on detail. There's been a significant number of questions that are quite important to our decision-making process already raised. Do you have confidence that we have enough information in this report to properly consider the matter today?
It's not relevant to the issue of public exclusion. I'm sorry, just procedurally where we are. I understand the question absolutely, and what I will do is, once we've dealt with the public excluded matter, Councillor Rutledge, I will come back, and then you can ask the exact question again, because it's a very relevant question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right,
Apologies
so,
for the mistake.
It's a very good question. Right, so it's been moved and seconded to go into public excluded. Does anyone want to speak for or against the motion? Speak to the motion?
Yes, I'll speak against it because I think it's extraneous. I don't think we need to be discussing this or have knowledge of this at this moment. My motion is purely about demolishing the building at 250 Haven Road. I think this is extra to my motion, and I think it should be handled separately. So I'll be voting against this motion to exclude the public.
All right, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? No. Show of hands, those for, moving into public excluded. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's carried. We go into public excluded. I'll just have to ask the gallery to please withdraw. Thank you. Nijay, if you could just disengage us from live streaming, that would be useful. Thank you, Council. We're now back in public. And Council, I'm very conscious that we have a Community Services Committee that needs to follow on from this meeting. We have a number of people that wish to speak to public forum. They're just coming into the chamber now to the Community Services Committee meeting. I think it is important that when the officers have done their best to contact the members of the public, and I just ask the members of the public if they could just quietly come back into the chamber so that the councillors can hear what I'm going to do next. I'm very I'll just wait till you come back in. Thank you. So, Councillor, I'm very conscious that members of the public have made arrangements to be here to speak to the Community Services Committee, and I think in respect to the members of the public, we will adjourn the council meeting to allow the Community Services Committee to commence so that the public forum can be conducted in a reasonably timely way for the people that have taken time off work and made arrangements to be here. I think that would be the appropriate thing to do. And then we will resume the council meeting. So we will now, I will adjourn the council meeting to resume later this morning at the conclusion of the Community Services Public Forum. So we stand adjourned. It'll take us just 5 minutes to do a very quick changeover in terms of the public recording. Thank you.